Hello everyone, welcome to Deep Sight. Let us take you on a journey through historical time and space and reveal the deep connotations behind historical events. In the previous issue, we focused on the Mongolian massacre of Baghdad and the demise of the Abbasid Dynasty, a catastrophe in the history of human civilization. This became a tragedy for the entire Islamic civilization in the Arab world, causing much of the history of Islamic civilization to disappear from people's memory. However, the decline of the Arab Empire did not mean the demise of the Islamic world. Mongolia and later the Ottoman Empire followed suit, chose to convert to Islam. Today, 800 years later, Islam is the second largest religion in the world, with more than 2 billion followers. Followers of Islam are mainly found in North Africa, the Middle East, Central Asia, and Southeast Asia. Indonesia is the country with the largest Muslim population, with approximately 231 million Muslims, accounting for nearly 13% of the world's total Muslim population. Islam includes major sects such as Sunni and Shia, as well as other smaller branches. Sunnis make up about 75 to 90% of the population, while Shia make up about 10 to 13% of the Muslim population. The data illustrate Islam's widespread influence and continued growth across the globe. In today's society, the emergence of various types of terrorism and fundamentalism among various religions is a complex phenomenon that usually involves various political and socio-economic issues, poverty, social injustice, cultural conflicts, low education levels, and lack of economic opportunities. This makes some people more sensitive to extreme ideas. Various extremists selectively interpret religious teachings to justify their actions in the name of religion. There's a lot of history and geopolitics involved, and historical conflicts and tensions in modern international relations may also have fueled the development of religious extremism. It needs to be emphasized that the vast majority of Muslims are peaceful, and the teachings of Islam itself advocate peace and tolerance. The actions of a few do not represent the entire religion or its adherents. There are also many Muslim countries and communities that are actively fighting these extremist and terrorist acts. World peace is what human civilization pursues. The history of the development of Islamic civilization has experienced many internal divisions and conflicts. Beginning with the founding of Islam in the 7th century, Muslim societies have experienced numerous political and religious divisions. These historical causes continue to today's society and influence the political landscape of the Muslim world. In this issue, let us focus on giving you a detailed introduction to the development of Islam and understand the grudges in history. In 570 AD, Muhammad was born in Mecca to a family called Banu Hashim, a branch of the prominent and influential Quraysh tribe. Muhammad was a posthumous son. His father passed away shortly before he was born, and his mother died when he was 6 years old. He was then raised by his grandfather and uncle. Muhammad began his business career at a young age and was known for his honesty and reliability. Around the age of 25, he began working for a wealthy widow, Khadija, whom he married soon after. The marriage gave him financial stability and more time for religious contemplation. Muhammad lived in a polytheistic society where people believed in traditional Arabic religion. This religious belief includes the worship of multiple gods, including idols in the Kaaba. Muhammad's family, the Quraysh tribe, were the guardians of the city of Mecca and were responsible for looking after the Kaaba. Mecca was an important religious and trade center at the time. Muhammad was exposed to local religious customs at an early age, but he did not actively participate in them. Instead, he became a thoughtful man, often brooding alone in a cave. In AD 610, Muhammad received his first revelation in the cave of Hira near Mecca, which was delivered through the angel Gabriel. He was told to preach monotheism and began to spread the revelations he had received, which were later compiled into the Quran. At this time, Christianity had become the state religion of the Roman Empire and was widely accepted by the barbarians. Islam was influenced by Christianity and Judaism during its creation. Although these three religious systems still have various differences today, they actually have quite a lot in common. For example, all three religions consider Abraham an important prophet and all regard Jerusalem as a holy site. Islam, Christianity, and Judaism also have a common origin, and they all believe in a God who creates and rules all things. Islam, which took shape in the later period, believes that the Quran is the most perfect revelation of God, while the Tanakh, the holy book of Judaism, and the Bible are both early revelations. However, in the eyes of Muslims, these early revelations were artificially tampered with during the later dissemination process and do not represent God's original intention. They consider Muhammad to be God's last prophet who delivered God's final revelation. In terms of belief systems, Islam also has certain similarities with Christianity and Judaism, such as belief in angels, the Last Judgment, and the concepts of heaven and hell. However, Islam has also established its own unique beliefs and practices, such as the 5 pillars, including faith, prayer, fasting, pilgrimage, and supporting the poor. From this year on, Muhammad established his absolute spiritual leadership status among his followers through precepts and deeds in Mecca and through personal practice. His followers fanatically center on him and regard him as the last prophet, which means that in the past, there were many religions founded by countless prophets, such as Adam, Noah, Moses, Jesus, and even the Virgin Mary, are all imperfect unorthodox beliefs. Only those who believe in the teachings spread by Muhammad are religious orthodoxies. Over the next 22 years, Muhammad pushed Islam to its peak. This is a rate of spread unprecedented in the history of religion. The word Islam comes from 3 roots in Arabic. Most of the words derived from these 3 roots have the meanings of completeness, security, and peace. Mecca was a relatively wealthy city at that time, and Muhammad's early spread experience was not smooth. His biggest obstacle was the opposition from the richest family in the area. This family is another important figure in Arab history we are going to talk about. Main characters: Umayyad family. The Umayyads were a powerful Arab family that originated from the Quraysh tribe, a noble clan that ruled Mecca in pre-Islamic times. The Umayyad family is named after Umayyad ibn Abdul Sams, a descendant of Qusay, the most famous leader of the Quraysh tribe. In the early days of Islam, Abu Sufyan, the leader of the Umayyad family, took the lead in opposing the founder of Islam, Muhammad, and his religious ideas. Muhammad and his followers suffered persecution from them. In 622 AD, these traditional families even united to drive Muhammad out of Mecca. After being forced to leave Mecca, Muhammad came to Medina, where he worked hard to preach and gradually accumulated a large number of followers. The early experience of persecution also made Muhammad's character stronger, and he decided to establish a political church. The unified system thus consolidated the spread and development of Islam. This event is known as Hijra and also marks the beginning of the Islamic calendar. However, another important member of the Umayyad family, Osman bin Affan, was one of Muhammad's earliest followers. In 630 AD, the 60-year-old Muhammad led this group of believers back to Mecca, using their powerful strength to force the aristocratic group in Mecca to completely surrender. The Umayyad family has since fully converted to Islam. It was in Medina that Muhammad became a political and religious leader, and used this as a base to expand and gradually unify the Arabian Peninsula. Islam became the largest religion in the entire Arabian Peninsula. Mecca, as the place where Muhammad was born and where Muhammad first preached, has since become the holiest city of Islam. Medina, as the land of the dragon of Muhammad, is known as the second holiest city of Islam. Maybe you will be confused. Isn't the holy city of Islam Jerusalem? In fact, Jerusalem is only the third holiest city in Islam. Today, Jerusalem, known as the birthplace of the 3 major religions, finally became the religious holy place of Islam due to a legendary story. The legendary story of Islamic believers happened in 621 AD after Muhammad began to preach. On the night of July 27th of the Islamic calendar, Muhammad received a revelation from heaven, and under the guidance of angels, he took advantage of the Pegasus to fly all the way from Mecca. Arriving in Jerusalem, Muhammad saw God, heaven, and hell. This story is called Walking to the Sky at Night, and this day was later designated as the festival of climbing the sky by Muslims. After Jerusalem became the third holiest city of Islam, it gradually came into conflict with Christian countries. This also triggered a 1,000-year dispute over the ownership of Jerusalem among the three major religions that continues to this day. In 632 AD, Muhammad died without leaving any will. The position of Islam is also the actual leader of secular society, which means the supreme ruler of the Islamic world, that is, Muhammad's agent. Its name is Caliph. Muhammad had no male descendants, which directly led to the division of those competing for the caliphate into two major factions. The first faction was headed by Muhammad's father-in-law Bakr. They had no direct blood relationship with Muhammad. They called them theocratic republicans. That is to say, the authority of the caliphate comes from heaven, and the capable person is in it. It does not depend on blood, and it is elected by everyone. This sect is called Sunni, and its representative countries are today's Saudi Arabia, Syria, Turkey, and other countries. The second faction is headed by Ali, who is Muhammad's cousin and son-in-law. Ali married Muhammad's favorite daughter, Fatima, and is Muhammad's cousin. He and his descendants have a direct blood relationship with Muhammad. Therefore, this sect is called hereditary, which means that the rights are derived from blood, and they are called Shia. The representative countries are today's Iran and Iraq. Sunni is derived from an abbreviation in Arabic, meaning the descendants of Muhammad and the unified will of the entire ethnic group. Shia is also an abbreviation, meaning followers of Ali. Ali was the name of one of Muhammad's sons-in-law, Talib. Despite such major disputes and divisions, since a committee composed of core nobles in the center of Mecca elected Bakr as Muhammad's successor, and Ali himself agreed, Bakr became the de facto successor leader. He became the first caliph of the Islamic world. However, during this period, some Muslims, especially many Arab tribes in remote areas, never recognized his successor status. And this disagreement has persisted for more than 1,000 years and continues to this day. Let's talk about how the collision of Islam and Christianity began. As early as when Muhammad was becoming seriously ill and unable to recover, some Arab tribes on the peninsula had already begun to show their rebellious intentions. They hold a basic position. They only listen to Muhammad. Since the Prophet is about to pass away, they will also break away from Islam. Therefore, as soon as Bakr succeeded to the throne, he immediately decided to launch a year-long campaign the next day. The counterinsurgency war was called the Ridda War in history books because Ridda means apostasy and apostasy in Arabic. The army that launched the Ridda War had already begun to take shape 2 or 3 years ago. In September 629 AD, less than 3 years before Muhammad's death, Muhammad raised an army of 3,000 men after an Islamic missionary was killed by a Byzantine chieftain in the ancient city of Basra in what is now southern Syria, ready to take revenge. The supreme commander of this army was Muhammad's adopted son Zayd. Unfortunately, the plan of the Islamic revenge army was known to the enemy's scouts in advance, and they reported it to the Byzantine Empire headquarters at night. The Roman legions set up an ambush of 20,000 troops near the village of Muerta on the east bank of the Jordan River in advance, intercepting the Islamic revenge army halfway. In an unfavorable situation where the enemy was outnumbered, the commander-in-chief Zayd took the lead, was seriously injured, and shed the last drop of blood. 2 lieutenants also died in the battle. The remaining troops, under the command of the temporarily elected commander Khalid, fought and retreated, broke through the encirclement, and retreated to Medina in present-day northwest Saudi Arabia. This was the earliest collision between the Islamic world and Christian countries. No one expected that it would last for thousands of years. Muhammad lost his adopted son and could not swallow this sigh of relief. In May 632 AD, 1 month before his death, he ordered the reconstruction of this army of 3,000 men, preparing for another expedition to the Byzantine Empire to avenge his adopted son. In accordance with the principle of inheritance from father to son, Zayd's son, young Osama, was appointed as the commander-in-chief of this elite force. However, before the time for revenge came, Muhammad passed away in June and Bakr was elected leader. In order to fulfill the Prophet's last wish, Bakr sent his subordinate Omar early in the morning on the second day, after he came to power, to send an order to Usama stationed in Medina to prepare for an expedition to avenge the defeat in the Battle of Muerta 2 years ago. However, Usama was worried and asked Umar to return to Mecca and conveyed his message. Go to the caliph and ask him to allow the army to stay in Medina. All the community leaders are with me. If we leave, no one will be able to stop the infidels from tearing Medina to pieces." Then, the stubborn Berker was unmoved and insisted on sending troops to conquer. Not only was he eager to complete the prophet's unfinished business, but he was also driven by the rebellion throughout the peninsula. As a result, Usama had no choice but to set up camp and lead his army to go on an expedition. The specific historical records of Berke's expedition to Byzantium are relatively limited, but what is certain is that he did begin military operations against the Byzantine border areas during his reign. These actions were further developed under his successor Umar, and eventually led to the conquest of some areas of Byzantium by Islamic forces. Bakr launched a military campaign to unify the tribes of the Arabian Peninsula. This series of battles became known as the Ridda Wars, and was aimed at fighting those who refused to pay religious taxes to the new caliphate or claimed a new one, the Tribe of Prophets. These battles were crucial in consolidating Islam's dominance and extending its influence throughout the Arabian Peninsula. The 30 years after Muhammad's death were an important period in Islamic history. From 632 to 661, 4 caliphs successively took charge of political and religious power in Islamic countries. These 4 are the 4 major caliphs of Islam, also known as the Orthodox caliphs. These 4 caliphs are considered by Sunni Muslims to be the legitimate successors of Muhammad, while Shia Muslims only recognize Ali and his descendants as legitimate caliphs. The Orthodox Caliphate period was an important development stage in Islamic history. Their rule played a role in connecting the past and the future and laid a solid foundation for the subsequent growth of the Islamic Empire. The first 3 caliphs of the 4 caliphs, Bakr, Umar, and Uthman, were all representatives of theocratic republics. The Arab world also began its foreign conquests during the era of these 3 caliphs. The Arabs conquered Syria from 634 AD to 638 AD. Under the command of Khalid bin Walid, the Muslim army occupied Damascus and fought at the Battle of Yarmouk in 636 AD. A decisive victory was achieved in the battle. In 637 AD, after a long siege, the Patriarch of Jerusalem surrendered to the Muslim forces, marking the fall of Jerusalem. The early stages of the Arab-Byzantine Wars. This period of war was characterized by Arab expansion, and the Byzantine Empire soon lost some of its southern provinces, such as Egypt and Syria. These battles were part of the early expansion of Islam and were part of the Arab-Byzantine Wars. This war ultimately led to the reduction of the Byzantine Empire's sphere of influence in the Middle East. Bakr's caliphate lasted only 2 years before he died of illness. During the reign of Bakr, the electoral system was established, so after his death, Umar was elected as the second caliph because of his high moral character. The election process involved senior members of the Muslim community who discussed and voted in Seqafa meetings. This process embodied the democratic spirit of early Islamic communities, although most of the subsequent caliphates came through a hereditary system. Umar's election is seen as a continuation of the Orthodox Caliphate period. During his reign, he made important contributions to the expansion and management of the Islamic Empire. Umar ibn al-Khattab. As the second caliph, Umar was known for his justice, and the Islamic Empire expanded greatly under his rule, including the conquests of Syria and Egypt. In 644 AD, a disaster struck suddenly. While Umar was performing morning prayers in the mosque, a Persian slave named Abu Lu'lu'a suddenly attacked him. He rushed forward during the prayer and stabbed Umar 6 times, causing Umar to fall in a pool of blood on the spot. After the assassination, Abu Lu'lu'a tried to escape and stabbed several people in the process. Finally, after the breakout failed, he chose to commit suicide. The assassination not only shocked the entire Islamic community, but also marked the end of an era and triggered a series of political changes. After Umar's death, Uthman bin Affan became the new caliph through the decision of the Electoral Committee. Uthman became the third caliph, which brought about major changes in the Islamic world. Countless bloody disputes began from this point on. Uthman was no ordinary person. He was a member of the powerful Umayyad family in Mecca, which laid the foundation for the Umayyad family to eventually form the new rulers of the Arab world. During the reign of Osman, the Umayyad family's power in the empire greatly expanded, occupying every corner of the empire. As the third Orthodox caliph, Uthman bin Affan had several important achievements during his reign. First, the compilation of the Quran. During his reign, Osman completed the final compilation of the Quran, which is the holy book of Islam. This achievement had far-reaching implications for the unification of Islamic doctrine and law. It can be said that today's Islamic holy scriptures were actually completed by Osman. He gathered the strength of everyone to record Muhammad's thoughts, words, and ways of doing things in a book, organized and compiled it into an all-inclusive Quran, which serves as the supreme code of conduct for Muslims around the world. The contents of the Quran cover all aspects of life and society, from financial services, commerce and trade, to social welfare, to family life, marital relationships, and even the surrounding environment, etc. Everything is included. Second, territorial expansion. Under his rule, the territory of the Arab Empire expanded significantly. The Sasanian dynasty in Iran was eliminated, and the Caucasus and Cyprus also became part of the Islamic world under military pressure. Third, Ottoman appointed a large number of members of the Umayyad family. Members of the Umayyad family held important positions in every corner of the empire, which strengthened centralization to a certain extent. However, Osman's rule was also controversial, especially his nepotism policy, which aroused dissatisfaction among those around him, which ultimately led to a tragedy that affected the future of the entire Islamic world. In AD 656, angry crowds surrounded Uthman's residence in Medina in protest. As the situation escalated, protesters demanded a new caliphate, which Uthman flatly refused. On June 17th, excited protesters set fire to Osman's house, and some of them broke into the house frantically from the back. They found Uthman, who was reading the Quran. The mob hit him on the head and stabbed him in the abdomen with a knife, causing him to die on the spot. The assassination had a polarizing effect on the Muslim world at the time. Questions have been raised not only about his character and policies, but also about the relationship between Muslims and the state, religious beliefs about rebellion and governance, and Islam's qualifications to rule. Uthman's death triggered a series of political changes that ultimately led to Ali bin Abi Talib becoming the new caliph. The assassination marked the end of the era of the four caliphs in early Islamic history and triggered the subsequent civil war, known as the First Civil War or War of Eligibility, which ultimately led to the Shia and schism among Sunnis. Uthman's death was a turning point in Islamic history and had a profound impact on subsequent political and religious developments. In the Islamic world after Osman's death, another protagonist finally stepped onto the stage of history. Ali ibn Abi Talib was born around 600 or 602 AD. He died in 661 AD. He was the fourth caliph in Islamic history. He reigned from 656 to 661. Ali was the last pure caliph recognized by the Sunnis and the only legitimate caliph recognized by the Shiites. Ali, like Muhammad, was born into the Hashemite family of the Quraysh clan in Mecca and was Muhammad's cousin. He was 30 years younger than Muhammad, so he was adopted by Muhammad at a very young age and became an early believer in Islam. In many of the early battles of the Prophet, Ali showed outstanding military talent and courage and was known as the Lion of Allah. After the death of the Prophet Muhammad, Ali had reservations about the authority of the first three caliphs, but in order to prevent the Muslim community from falling into civil war, he chose not to compete for the status of the caliph. It was not until the third caliph, Uthman ibn Affan, was killed that Ali was elected caliph and moved his capital to Kufa, Iraq. As caliph, Ali's reign was marked by civil strife and political strife. His attempts to reform the government and reduce the power of the Umayyads led to several civil wars. Although Muslim society became politically divided under his leadership, he was also regarded as a wise and courageous leader. Ali's remarks and letters were compiled by later scholars, including many of his speeches and letters. These documents had a profound impact on Islamic law and theology. He is regarded as the first imam among Shiites and a symbol of the orthodox successor of Muhammad. Ali's life and thought remain an important part of the Islamic world today. Let us explain in detail how the schism in Islam occurred. When Ali came to power, the Umayyad family, as a representative of the theocratic republic, was absolutely opposed. Osman's death was unclear. Muawiyah, the governor of Syria at the time, was also a representative of the Umayyad family and an absolutely powerful faction. He directly announced that it was Ali killed Uthman and immediately raised an army in Damascus to challenge Ali's rule. At this time, Ali was welcomed by the public. As a cousin of the Prophet Muhammad, he also married Muhammad's favorite daughter. His children were truly of the Prophet's blood. He received the support of a large number of Muhammad's admirers. At the beginning of the war, Ali's side won a great victory, and Muawiyah could hardly see the possibility of victory. Muawiyah was a leader of extraordinary wisdom. At the critical moment, he asked the soldiers to put the Quran compiled by Osman on their spearheads and shouted loudly, "Let God decide the final outcome." At this time, Ali's camp was also divided into two major factions. One faction was in charge of negotiations, and the other was in charge of fighting. Since the peace faction had the upper hand in numbers, Ali chose to negotiate peace with Muawiyah, which was the most irreparable mistake he ever made. The main war faction could not accept this plan. The 12,000-strong main war faction army directly deserted Ali and established the Hawaliki sect, a branch of Shia. Ali's strength was severely damaged. On January 26, 661 AD, at the Great Mosque of Kufa in present-day Iraq, a Kharijite assassin named Abdulrahman hit Ali in the head with a sword coated with poison, causing him to die on both sides. This incident also became a major event in the history of Islam and had a profound impact on Muslim society. After Ali's death, he was buried in Najaf, a place that later became a Shia holy site. At this time, Muawiyah had full wings and had no rivals in the Arab world. With his strong strength, he undoubtedly became the new caliph. The dynasty he established was the famous Umayyad Dynasty. The area of Syria where he garrisoned has since become the new capital of the Islamic world, which is Damascus, the capital of Syria today. Regrettably, if Muawiyah knew this underground, he would not know how he would feel when he saw the Syrian refugees who are now begging in Europe. The costumes and symbols of the Umayyad dynasty were mainly white flags and white clothes. In the historical materials of the Tang dynasty, they were called the white-clothed dashi. This habit continues to this day. Take a look at the attire of the royal family of Saudi Arabia, the representative country of Sunnism. They have white robes and white headscarves. This style has a history of more than 1,000 years. As a representative of the theocratic republic, Muawiyah began to pass the throne to his descendants in a hereditary manner after becoming the caliph. As the saying goes, "Father's love is greater than heaven, blood must be thicker than water, and other rules can be forgotten." Therefore, so many years of fighting resulted in a ridiculous ending. The Umayyad family, which was flying the banner of the theocratic republic, but the theocratic republic system lost and disappeared. The Umayyad dynasty, established under the leadership of Muawiyah, became the first hereditary dynasty in Islamic history. The Umayyad dynasty had an important influence on the early Muslim conquests, and during its reign, the Islamic world achieved unprecedented territorial expansion. Then the dead Ali's side ushered in their darkest moment. Ali's eldest son Hassan is a true grandson of Muhammad. He knew that he did not have the strength to confront Muawiyah, so he chose to retreat to the holy land of Medina. However, this did not allow him to escape his bad luck, and he passed away inexplicably here. Ali's second son Hussein was a strong fighter. He firmly refused to accept Muawiyah, a self-proclaimed ruler with no orthodox bloodline. Unfortunately, Hussein, who was single and weak, was completely defeated by Muawiyah. He was brutally killed. Muhammad, the founder of Islam, would never have imagined that the Umayyad family, which was strongly opposed to him, would actually become the rulers of the new world he created. Not only did they pass their rule hereditary to their descendants, but they also, it is a great irony, to kill the descendants of Muhammad. Hussein's death allowed the Shiites to gradually form a new system. They are the continuation of the Ali group. At this time, faced with the theocratic Republican Sunnis who established a new hereditary system, they could only face reality with silence. Compared to the Shiites, they are obviously more tolerant and have completely lost their past stance. This struggle involved Islamic orthodoxy, which resulted in the Umayyad dynasty never spending a day in peace from the day it was founded. During their rule, the Umayyads implemented a policy of discrimination against non-Arab Muslims, treating them as second-class citizens. This led to widespread dissatisfaction and revolt. In 720 AD, the Abbasid family, who claimed to be a descendant of Abbas, the uncle of the Prophet Muhammad, took advantage of this dissatisfaction. They united the Persian freed slaves Abu Muslims and Shia Muslims, attracting the support of a large number of non-Arab Muslims. New opposition groups were established. This was the origin of the Abbasid dynasty. In 747 AD, a large-scale rebellion broke out in the Umayyad dynasty. The main cause of the rebellion was the disunity between the border residents of the dynasty and the Damascus government. The governors appointed by the dynasty were severely corrupt, and they oppressed the people for the sake of personal wealth. At the same time, between 746 and 749 AD, Abu Abbas Safa, a descendant of the Abbas family, carried out careful strategic planning and launched a series of military operations. They first gained support in the greater Iran region and gradually expanded their sphere of influence. On January 25, 750 AD, the army of the Umayyad Caliph Marwan II fought a full-scale war with the army of Abbas at the Zab River. The number of Marwan's troops was much larger than that of Abbas. The Umayyad army included many experienced veterans who had participated in the Eastern Roman Empire. However, at this time, the army's support for the caliphate dropped to a freezing point. While the morale of the entire army was low due to a series of earlier defeats, Abbas's army was in high morale. Abbas's entire army formed a spear formation to face the enemy, which was called a spear wall tactic, but the Umayyad cavalry was blindly confident that they could break through the spear formation. This fatal mistake led to heavy casualties of the cavalry, which became the last straw to defeat the Umayyad army. The entire army plummeted thousands of miles and collapsed completely. Countless soldiers were killed by the fanatical Abbasids, and those who were not killed fell into the Koldzabil River in groups. According to statistics, 300 members of the Umayyad family alone were killed in this battle. The miserable Marwan escaped from the battlefield and fled to the Levant. Abbas's army pursued them relentlessly, and they fought almost without a fight in Syria without encountering any decent resistance. The place had earlier suffered from earthquakes and plagues. Marwan finally arrived in a small town in Egypt's Nile Delta. Marwan was eventually killed in a minor battle a few months after the Battle of the Zab River. Abu Abbas became the new caliph. In order to consolidate their power, the new dynasty raided the Umayyad remnants and killed almost all the Umayyads, leaving only the last male, Abdul Rahman I. He fled to the Iberian Peninsula and founded the Umayyad dynasty. Let us introduce you to the Islamization process of the Iberian Peninsula. At the beginning of the 7th century AD, Muhammad founded the Arab Empire of Islam and theocracy in the Arabian Peninsula. The Arab Empire expanded eastward to Persia, Afghanistan, and the Indus River Valley, and westward to the entire North African region up to Morocco. The Arab Empire succeeded in converting the Berbers, the indigenous people of North Africa, to Islam. In 711 AD, the Arabs used Morocco as a base to launch a war to conquer the Iberian Peninsula. The Arabs easily crossed the Strait of Gibraltar and controlled most of Spain in less than half a year. By 713 AD, the Arabs had conquered almost the entire Iberian Peninsula. In 750 AD, the only remaining prince after the Umayyad dynasty was massacred. Abdul Rahman refused to recognize the authority of the Abbasid Caliphate. After that, he fled for 6 years and came to the Iberian Peninsula. In order to regain power, he defeated the existing Muslim rulers in the region who were resisting Umayyad rule and unified the various local fiefdoms into a single emirate. However, the first unification of Al-Andalus under Abd al-Rahman still took more than 25 years to complete. Toledo, Zaragoza, Plana, Barcelona. He became the independent emir of Córdoba. This is the famous post-Umayyad dynasty. In 929 AD, the emir Abd al-Rahman III of the Emirate of Córdoba proclaimed himself caliph and established the Caliphate of Córdoba. The territory of this regime includes the Iberian Peninsula and parts of North Africa. Its capital is Córdoba, Spain. Spain during this period actually became an independent country ruled by Muslims. Spain, ruled by Muslims, was quite unusual in medieval Europe. The Caliphate of Córdoba is one of the most powerful Islamic regimes in the Western world, with a growing culture, economy, and science. The characteristic architecture of Al-Andalus was also formed during this period. During this period, Europe was still in the Dark Ages of the Middle Ages. Its level of civilization was far lower than that of Eastern China, India, and the Middle East at the same time. However, the Iberian Peninsula under Muslim rule was particularly unique. During the Muslim rule, the Spanish capital Córdoba had more than 500,000 residents and more than 700 mosques. Although its prosperity is slightly inferior to that of Eastern cities at the same time, it is very prominent in the whole of Europe. The currency of this Muslim-dominated Spanish kingdom is even circulated in some African countries. The Caliphate of Córdoba experienced a decline throughout its history caused by a number of factors. After the death of Abdulrahman III, political infighting broke out among the rulers of the later Umayyad dynasty. The powerful minister Mansur and his son Sankolluo tried to usurp the throne, leading to internal divisions in the regime. Then, foreign armies such as the Berbers and Sigrebs continued to grow in the post-Umayyad period and came into conflict with the local nobles. The rise of foreign armies weakened the regime's military capabilities. The stability of Al-Andalus's social organization and the continuity of its governing institutions were crucial to the functioning of the regime. However, political success is often seen as a success for the tribe rather than the success of the Córdoba government. This directly leads to the instability of social organization. The Berbers grew in size and power, affecting the ethnic balance. The perpetuation of ethnic distinctions was politically disastrous for the Berbers and led to a breakdown in the ethnic balance. In the end, tax and trade profits flowed mainly to Córdoba, without commensurate returns to residents of the border and other areas. The collapse of the post-Umayyad dynasty led to a redistribution of resources that was inequitable and failed to serve the interests of regions and communities. Eventually, the post-Umayyad dynasty split into several independent Thai kingdoms in 1031, entered the era of feudal rule. The Taifa, also known as the Zaragoza Taifa, were some small Muslim kingdoms that appeared on the Iberian Peninsula after the disintegration of the Umayyad dynasty in the early 11th century. Most of these small countries were short-lived, working on their own and attacking each other. They often turned to Christian countries for aid against hostile Muslim monarchs, or turned to North African countries for aid against Christian monarchs. These countries were capricious and thus became targets for the growing Christian reconquest forces. Although the Taifa countries made little political achievements, they fostered a period of Muslim cultural renaissance. The Taifa monarchs imitated the model of the Caliphate court, recruited poets, and promoted the study of philosophy, natural science, and mathematics. In 1085, Alfonso VI of Leon captured Toledo, and some Taifa kings asked Yusuf ibn Tashfin of the Almoravid dynasty of Morocco for help. Yusuf personally led the reinforcements to land in Spain and defeated Alfonso VI at the Battle of Salaka in 1086. By 1090 to 1091, Yusuf annexed all the small Taifa countries on the Iberian Peninsula except Zaragoza, allowing the power of the Almoravid dynasty to expand into Spain. Let us take you back to the Abbasid era when the Umayyad dynasty was wiped out. This change was not only a political change, but also represented a major shift in culture and social structure. During its reign, the Abbasid dynasty brought the Islamic world to its peak. Shiites are absolute supporters of the hereditary system. The Persian peasant army in the army is not the core of the Arab regime. The Abbasid dynasty of Abu Abbas unified Sunnis and Shiites. They moved their capital from Damascus in Syria and later to Baghdad in Iraq during the time of Mansur, and built Baghdad into the largest and most magnificent city in the world, a center of politics, economy, and trade, linking Eastern and Western civilizations. On this point, see our previous video, Baghdad. The clothing of the Abbasid dynasty was completely opposite to that of the Umayyads. They advocated black. In Chinese historical materials, they were called the Big Eaters in black. The expansion of the black-clad empire was even greater than that of the Umayyad dynasty, and it expanded its tentacles to the east. In July 751 AD, the Tang dynasty and the Abbasid armies met in the Talas Valley to compete for the Sir Darya River region in Central Asia. Of control. According to Chinese sources, after several days of stalemate, the caloric Turks, originally allied with the Tang dynasty, defected to the Abbasids in Arabia, upsetting the balance of power and leading to the collapse of the Tang dynasty. This defeat marked the end of the Tang's westward expansion and led to Muslim Arab control of Transcontinental for the next 400 years. Controlling the region was economically advantageous for the Abbasid dynasty because it was located on the Silk Road. Chinese prisoners of war captured after the war brought papermaking technology to West Asia. The Abbasid dynasty reached its peak in 800 AD, with a population of 44 million and a land area of 12.6 million square kilometers. It was undoubtedly the world's largest superpower in medieval history. The decline of the Abbasid dynasty is similar to the rise and fall of Rome in history. The Abbasid rulers became corrupt in their later years, and political corruption and internal divisions led to political instability. The succession to the throne was unstable and civil strife occurred frequently, weakening the actual control of the dynasty. The Abbasid dynasty's high taxes, brutal exploitation, and social oppression led to popular dissatisfaction. Multiple civil and military coups weakened the stability of the dynasty. The Abbasids ruled a region with diverse ethnic groups and sects, and cultural and religious differences led to internal discord. And local governors also began to separate themselves from the central government. The invasion of foreign forces such as the Seljuk dynasty and the Mongol Empire completely replaced the actual control of the dynasty. After the 9th century, the Turks seized military power and the power of the caliphate and began to play with the government. This is very similar to the late Roman army being controlled by the Germans. At the beginning of the 10th century, the Abbasid dynasty began to split. The empire was left with only an empty frame, and below it were all the princes who could not control their own affairs. Let's explain in depth the legal system of the dynasty and why they are both Shiites and there are major differences between them. It can be said that the Islamic world is full of factions and ethnic groups, and it is as difficult to sort out the relationship between the interests of all parties as it is a tangled mess. This is because although Abbas and Muhammad are related by blood, this does not have the full support of the Shiites. Because the Shiites firmly support the descendants of Ali and Muhammad's daughter Fatima, they believe that this is the true bloodline of Muhammad and the real caliph. From a blood point of view, they have a more direct blood link than the descendants of Abu Abbas, while the descendants of the Abbasid dynasty are only collateral lines. In 909 AD, Abu Abdullah Hussein, the preacher of the Ismaili branch of the Shia sect, led troops to capture Raqqara and rescued Sayyid ibn Hussein. Said status is extraordinary because he claims to be a descendant of Ali and Fatima, which means that he is the orthodox direct line supported by the Shiites. The establishment of this flag caused Shia believers to gather around Said, and he naturally established the Fatimid dynasty in Egypt. Egypt is an Islamic country today and has a history of more than 1,000 years. This one favors green, and they also appear in Chinese historical records. They are called green eaters. The Fatimid dynasty was actually just a local government that divided Egypt. Like the Cordoba we introduced earlier, it always had a subtle relationship with the Abbasid dynasty. By the late 11th century AD, the Fatimid dynasty began to decline. The Seljuks, Crusaders, Normans, etc. successively captured large areas of their land. Especially when the Zanji dynasty, that is, the Turkic princes who occupied Syria and Iraq, sent Sirku and his nephew Saladin to assist the Fatimid dynasty. The Fatimid dynasty was coming to an end. In 1171 AD, Saladin completely destroyed the Fatimid dynasty and established his own Ayyubid dynasty. Egypt's Shia sect once again lost power, and the Sunnis regained control of Egypt. Let us give you a detailed introduction to Saladin. Saladin was a Muslim sultan of Egypt and Syria who was best known for defeating a large crusader army at the Battle of Hattin and capturing Jerusalem in 1187. At the height of his power, he ruled over a unified Muslim region from Egypt to Arabia. Before Baghdad was destroyed by the Mongols, Saladin was the true king of power in the Islamic world. Saladin was born in 1137 or 1138 in Tikrit, in central Iraq, which is also a strategic location that has been an important battle in the Iraqi civil war in recent years. His family is actually Kurdish, and his father Ayyub and uncle Shirkuh were elite military leaders of Imad al-Din Zangi, the powerful ruler who ruled northern Syria at the time. Growing up in Damascus and rising through the ranks in the army, young Saladin joined the army commanded by his uncle Shirkuh, who served Zangi's son and successor Nur al-Din on a military expedition to Egypt. Saladin was an outstanding leader, and he also accumulated his popularity and support step by step from the bottom. After Shirkuh's death, Saladin was selected as his successor, commanded Nur al-Din's army in Egypt, and was appointed prime minister of the Fatimid Caliphate that ruled Egypt at the time. With the death of the last Fatimid Caliph in 1171, Saladin became ruler of Egypt, and since he had no blood ties to Muhammad, he set out to reduce the power and influence of Shiite Islam, which he eventually succeeded in a Sunni regime was re-established. He ruled Egypt under the name Nur al-Din, strengthening it as a base for Sunni power in the Near East. After becoming ruler of Egypt, Saladin began a campaign against other Muslims. Nur al-Din died in 1174, and Saladin launched a campaign to gain control of the lands he once ruled. He also sought to establish his regime as a significant military player capable of challenging the four Western-controlled Crusader states established in the wake of the First Crusade, 1098–99. As Sultan of Egypt, Saladin returned to Syria and successfully captured Damascus, Aleppo, and Mosul from other Muslim rulers. Saladin's armies also conquered Yemen, allowing him to consolidate control over the entire Red Sea. In addition to military feats, he also pursued his goals through diplomatic efforts. He married Ismet, the widow of Nur al-Din and the daughter of Anur, the late ruler of Damascus, which helped him gain legitimacy through his association with both ruling dynasties. Finally, he won widespread Muslim support by declaring himself the leader of a jihad dedicated to defending Islam against Christianity. Saladin's goal was to unify the Muslim leaders of Syria, Mesopotamia, Palestine, and Egypt. The most glorious moment in Saladin's life occurred in 1187. His reign coincided with the peak of the Crusades. The Crusaders occupied the holy city of Jerusalem and massacred local Muslims and believers of other religions. The task of recovering Jerusalem and restoring the glory of Islam in the holy city of Jerusalem fell squarely on Saladin, the new de facto Islamic leader. Before 1187, Saladin led his army, first occupying Damascus, and then step by step bringing Syria, Egypt, Yemen, and most of Iraq under the rule of a powerful sultan, forming a siege of Jerusalem. On July 4th, which is now the 4th of July in the United States, the armies of the Crusaders and Saladin finally met near Mount Hardin in what is now Palestine, Israel. This battlefield is located near Tiberias, close to the Roman road from Jaffa to the Jordanian crossing in the Sea of Galilee. The core area of today's Israeli-Palestinian conflict is also within the scope of these historical areas. This is the famous historical site. The Battle of Harding, also known as the Battle of Harding's Corner, is considered a turning point in the history of the Crusades. The king of Jerusalem at the time was Guy de Lusignan, who ruled a divided Crusader state. Saladin attacked Tiberias near Lake Galilee, prompting the Crusaders to decide to rescue the besieged city. Some 20,000 Crusaders left their camp and attempted to reach besieged Tiberias. However, they ran out of water in the hot, arid plains and were constantly harassed by Saladin's cavalry. The Crusaders continued their advance the next day, but encountered Saladin's army on the hills above the village of Hardin. Here they were driven back to Harding's Point, the two largest hills, and unable to fight effectively. Saladin commanded an army of over 30,000 men. Among them are 12,000 of the most courageous assault light cavalry. Today's historians estimate, based on archaeological research from various parties, that the total number of Saladin's army may have exceeded 60,000, of which the number of combat soldiers was approximately 20,000. These warriors have undergone rigorous training and have rich combat experience. This ensured that Saladin's army achieved a decisive victory in this crucial battle. At the Battle of Hattin, Saladin cleverly exploited the Crusaders' weaknesses. He discovered that the Crusaders' line was separated by two low hills, so he set a trap. He sent his cavalry to hide behind hills and guided the Crusader cavalry in pursuit. At the same time, the archers hid on the hills and attacked the pursuing cavalry with arrows. This caused the Crusader cavalry to fall into confusion and panic. They scrambled in all directions and were eventually completely surrounded by Saladin's army. Saladin's army surrounded the Crusaders, who were in a lonely situation. The light cavalry rode on their horses and rushed towards the Crusaders like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. The Crusader soldiers fell down in despair in the battle without resistance. In a pool of blood, Saladin's army captured a large number of knights and captured a fragment of the True Cross. This battle resulted in the Muslims once again becoming the main military force in the Holy Land, recapturing Jerusalem and most of the other Crusader-held cities and castles. These Christian defeats prompted the beginning of the Third Crusade. After the Battle of Hattin, Saladin quickly captured many cities including Acre, Nablus, Jaffa, Turin, Sidon, Beirut, and Ascalon. On September 20th, 1187, Saladin's army appeared densely under the walls of Jerusalem and began to siege Jerusalem. The siege lasted until October 2nd, although the city of Jerusalem was filled with refugees, but the number of defensive troops was limited. Saladin's army made several attempts to storm the city. Balian of Ibelin, king of Jerusalem, was forced to negotiate with Saladin and eventually had to surrender peacefully. Saladin demonstrated his political wisdom by allowing many Christians to leave safely and showing tolerance for Muslims and Christians of different faiths in the city who decided to stay. Saladin restored the Muslim holy sites in Jerusalem and allowed Orthodox and Eastern Christian pilgrims to freely visit the holy sites. Of course, he also pioneered a tourism economy by requiring Catholic pilgrims to pay a fee to enter. This conquest demonstrated Saladin's military talent and political wisdom, and his actions were widely praised by later generations for their relative tolerance and kindness. The loss of Jerusalem sparked the Third Crusade, but Saladin successfully maintained control of the city until his death in 1193. The decline of the Ayyubid dynasty was caused by many factors. After Saladin's death, there was a power struggle within the dynasty, and various princes competed for inheritance rights, resulting in the weakening of the country's power. These internal conflicts have never been effectively resolved. At the same time, external pressure is also increasing, especially the rise of the Mongol Empire, which has brought unprecedented challenges to many regimes in the Middle East. Although Saladin was a wise ruler, his regime relied to a certain extent on his personal leadership and prestige. After his death, he did not leave a solid succession mechanism, which also paved the way for subsequent infighting and division. The Ayyubid dynasty quickly lost Jerusalem in the battles between Saladin's sons and grandsons, ultimately leading to the dynasty's decline. The Mongols captured Baghdad, the capital of the Abbasid dynasty, in 1258 and continued to march westward in the following years, occupying most of Syria, which made the Ayyubid rule exist in name only. After the Mongols left, the Ayyubid dynasty only survived in a corner of Hama. The last ruler of the Ayyubid dynasty was Ifdal Muhammad. He ascended the throne of the Sultan of the Ayyubid dynasty in 1341, and it was not officially destroyed until 1341 when its last ruler was deposed by the Mamluk dynasty. Although short-lived, the Ayyubid dynasty ushered in a period of economic prosperity and allowed civilization to flourish again in the Islamic world. The Mamluk dynasty, also known as the Mamluk dynasty, was an Islamic regime established in Egypt and Syria by a military ruling group founded by slaves. This dynasty existed from 1250 to 1517 and was divided into two main periods, the Bakhali dynasty and the Burgi dynasty. Biharili dynasty, 1250 to 1382, it was ruled by Kipchak Turkic slave owners. The Mamluks during this period were mainly of Turkic descent. They were on duty on the Nile River, hence the name Biharili, which means river, continent. Burgi dynasty, 1382 to 1517, composed of Caucasians, especially Circassians. During this period, the Mamluks implemented a king selection system. The Mamluk dynasty was characterized by the control of a military group composed of slaves or military slaves. They were initially slave soldiers serving the Arab Caliphate and the Ayyubid dynasty. However, with the decline of the Caliphate and the disintegration of the Ayyubid dynasty, they gradually became a powerful military ruling group and established their own dynasty in Egypt. The Mamluk dynasty reached its peak in the 14th century, but gradually declined after the 15th century. They attached great importance to the trade between the Mediterranean and the Golden Horde. However, due to Timur's invasion, Locust invasion, and the Portuguese opening of direct waterways, the dynasty collapsed. The last Mamluk Sultan, Tumen Bey, was killed by the Ottoman Sultan Selim I in the Battle of Rodania in 1517, and the Mamluk dynasty perished. Let's talk about the Islamic world after Baghdad. The peak era of the Mongol Empire was when Hulagu destroyed Baghdad and Kublai Khan captured Shenyang city. This marked the destruction of the two largest superpowers in the medieval world under the Iron Heel of Mongolia. However, after the Mongol Empire reached its peak in the middle of the 13th century, began to gradually decline. Internal divisions and territorial losses provided opportunities for the rise of the Ottoman Empire. The fragmentation of the Mongol Empire led to a weakening of the ruling power, allowing the Ottomans to gain more influence in Asia Minor. The rise of the Ottoman Empire was formed with the expansion of the Mongol Empire. It was located in Asia Minor, where a political vacuum emerged after the Mongol Empire's western expeditions. The Mongol Empire's rule in West Asia was not stable, leaving behind many separatist tribes and military groups. It was in this environment that the Ottoman Empire gradually grew. Osman I, the founder of the Ottoman Empire, and his successors displayed outstanding military and organizational abilities. Not only did they achieve a series of victories on the battlefield, they also consolidated their power through political marriages and diplomatic means. The Ottoman Empire opened up the road to Europe by controlling key areas such as the Dardanelles Strait and the southern coast of the Sea of Marmara. This geographical advantage provides an important strategic channel for its subsequent expansion. Although the Ottoman Empire chose to convert to Islam in order to consolidate its rule, just as the Germans accepted Christianity and adopted Islam as the state religion. This caused Muslims in all the areas it ruled to quickly accept the new rulers, and it knew better. The country has adopted a relatively tolerant religious policy, allowing different religions and cultures to coexist under its rule. This policy helped stabilize newly conquered areas and attracted talent from diverse backgrounds. The Ottoman Empire was located at the intersection of eastern and western trade routes. By controlling trade routes and developing its economy, the Ottoman Empire accumulated huge wealth, which provided financial support for its military expansion and cultural development. These factors worked together to enable the Ottoman Empire to rise after the decline of the Mongol Empire and eventually establish a huge empire spanning 3 continents. AD 1453 was another historical turning point and the end of a century. Ottoman descendant Mehmed II, the young sultan of the empire, personally directed the attack. He assembled a massive army, estimated at 80,000 to 200,000 men, and 320 warships. Constantinople's geographical location is very important. It is located on the west coast of the Bosporus. The city is triangular in shape, with the Golden Horn to the north and the Sea of Marmara to the south. The city's fortifications are very strong. Mehmed II employed a variety of siege strategies, including using cannon to breach the walls, filling trenches, erecting ladders, and even digging tunnels under the walls. He also changed his offensive strategy and bribed Genoese businessmen to sneak into the Golden Horn to achieve a land and sea attack. In the final stages of the siege, Mehmed II towed 80 caravels from the Bosporus over the hills and into the Golden Horn overnight, a move that greatly increased the mobility of his army. Finally, on May 29, 1453, the Ottoman army launched a general attack on Constantinople from both sea and land. The city's defenses were breached and Constantinople fell. This battle was not only a military victory, but also triggered a reconsideration of maritime trade routes in Europe, which ultimately led to European voyages to discover the New World. Additionally, the fall of Constantinople allowed the Ottoman Empire to control the major overland trade routes linking Europe and Asia, thus strengthening their economic and political influence. The Ottoman Empire was an empire that lasted from 1299 to 1923. At its peak in 1496 AD, it spanned 3 continents, Europe, Asia, and Africa, and its territory included Egypt, Syria, and the Arabian Peninsula. However, Ottoman rule was not entirely a purely Islamic regime. Let's take a look at the path of religious change in the Ottoman Empire. The rise of the Ottoman Empire. As a barbarian who converted to Islam, the political power of the Ottomans was derived from tribal authority and military conquest. The Ottoman Sultan exercised political, judicial, financial, and administrative functions of government through the establishment of a political council, called the Diwan. Although Islam played an important role in the Ottoman Empire, political unity emphasized secular politics rather than religious identity. The game between religious politics and secular politics. The Ottoman Sultan relied less on religion than the Arab Caliphate, and within the empire's territory, the caliphate only had value in the Muslim community. Therefore, the Ottoman Empire emphasized political unity rather than religious identity. Although Islam played an important role in the Ottoman Empire, the attachment of secular politics to religious politics continued throughout the history of the Ottoman Empire. In short, the religious and secular political system of the Ottoman Empire was not completely consistent, and the dependence of religious politics on secular politics has been throughout the history of the Ottoman Empire. So far, we have used one video to describe the history of the entire Islamic world for you, giving you a comprehensive understanding of its complex historical causes and revealing an intricate and complete network of relationships. Many of the numerous and complex disputes in the Islamic world today are closely related to these historical entanglements, bloody killings, competition for interests, and millennia-old conflicts. In today's Islamic world, the biggest divisions are still between Shiites and Sunnis. Of course, there are intricate relationships between each sect. The two orthodox Umayyad dynasties and the Abbasid dynasty in the Arab Empire were both representatives of the Sunni sect. They had suppressed the Shia sect for a long time, thousands of years ago. Although the Fatimid dynasty was established by the Shia sect, it was just a corner, and it's short-lived. It has to be said that it is a miracle that the Shia sect, which has gone through countless hardships, can continue to survive until now and maintain a considerable scale. In the feudal era, the Shia lineage theory had a large number of supporters. On the contrary, the Republican theory of Sunnis is not recognized. From a historical perspective, many Sunni leaders are actually practicing the hereditary system, which is equivalent to acknowledging the correctness of Shi'ism in disguise, but they do not recognize Ali's descendants as orthodox. So historically, Sunnis have always had the upper hand. This is why until now in the Islamic world, Sunnis still account for 90% of believers, while Shias have less than 10% of believers. Today, Iran, which is dominated by Persians, has the largest number of Shia believers in the world. This is one of the important reasons why they are incompatible with many Arab countries. AD 1258 was a major turning point in history. After Baghdad was captured by the Mongol Empire, the Islamic world experienced an unprecedented catastrophe in human history. This history marked the end of the Islamic Abbasid dynasty, which had been the world's most powerful country for hundreds of years, but Islam did not die as a result. On the contrary, it quickly survived in subsequent history and continued to develop and spread to every new nation and country it integrated. First of all, the Islamic world under Mongol rule. Although the Mongols destroyed Baghdad, they did not completely eliminate Islam. In fact, numerous Mongol rulers later converted to Islam, especially in the Islamic areas they ruled. In 1299 AD, only 41 years after the fall of Baghdad, the Ottoman Empire, a new country formed by the Turkic tribes that developed with the Mongol army, rose rapidly. They embraced Islam and gradually became the most powerful Islamic country that threatened Europe. It conquered the Balkans, the Middle East, and North Africa between the 15th and 17th centuries and became the center of the new Islamic world. Despite the Mongol devastation, Islamic culture and science were continued by the Ottoman Empire in the following centuries. It has made significant contributions to other Islamic countries in art, architecture, literature, and science. The human catastrophe of 1258 AD was a major historical turning point in the Islamic world. However, Islam did not decline as a result. Instead, it continued to spread and develop around the world, forming the diverse Islamic world we see today. The core ideas of religions are to promote peace, love, and understanding. The importance of harmony, tolerance, and nonviolence is emphasized in different religious traditions. Buddhism advocates not killing as one of the 5 precepts, Christianity advocates love your neighbor as yourself, and Islam advocates peace. Islam itself means peace. Countless religions have been used as excuses for conflict in history, often influenced by political, economic, or social factors rather than guided by religious teachings. The true religious spirit is about universal values that connect human beings and promote empathy and understanding. Peace is the hope of human happiness and beauty, and is also the highest expression of civilization. Dear friends, this is our content in this issue. You are welcome to leave a message and like it. Let us pursue the truth of history and foresee a bright future with a humble heart. See you next time.